Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Something doesn't add up about Dedra Meero's story. In some Star Wars shows, this is usually due to poor writing, poor planning, right? They just didn't think out things properly and then you have plot holes. Although other times it's just, Star Wars YouTubers like myself or fans just digging too deep into the content, looking for too much, maybe. But the beauty of Andor is that usually you are rewarded when you dig deep into this content. I mean, Tony Gilroy and his team of writers are obsessed with details. They leave very little up to chance. There seems to be purpose behind every little detail and line they add to the show. Now about Dedra. No, it's not our relationship with Cyril Karn that is the problem. That actually makes a lot of sense to me. Despite the fact that they're both supporters of a despotic authoritarian regime, I'm almost happy that these two crazy kids have found each other in this chaotic galaxy. Because as we'll learn, both of these individuals have ample amounts of childhood trauma, and it's really shaped their worldview, made them obsessed to a certain degree with having control over their lives and their immediate surroundings, which also steers both of them towards the law enforcement profession and to holding more authoritarian views. We know about Cyril's trauma. She's coming for lunch.
Can I say how pleasing it is to hear he's found someone with whom he can actually communicate?
Mother, would you like
I'll get there.
What if Cyril is based off of J. Edgar Hoover? There's another guy who really loved law enforcement and his version of justice, who also had a really close relationship with his mom. But what about Dedra's trauma? It's clear to me that she probably has even more trauma than Cyril Karn and probably a more messed up childhood. Well, we actually learn about it right here during this brunch.
Tell me about your family.
I don't have one. My parents were criminals. They were arrested when I was 3. I was raised in an Imperial Kinderblock.
Just some light, casual table conversation at the Miro household. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, Dedra, despite being extremely sharp and independent-minded, is also heavily indoctrinated. Her parents were criminals, and so she was taken away from them at the age of 3, and she thinks this is fine. She was also raised in an Imperial Kinderblock, which she also believes is fine, which terrifies me. So first, the timing here, as a few of you have pointed out, doesn't really make sense. Dedra says that her parents were arrested when she was 3. So let's say she's 30 to 40 years old. That would mean that when she was 3 years old, it would have been around 31 to 41 BBY. That means her parents' arrest happened before the blockade of Naboo during the reign of the Galactic Republic. The Republic, despite all of its flaws, had a pretty intact judicial system until the, very last days of the Clone Wars. This is a legal system based on rules, order, and fairness. And generally in these more liberal societies, when you have parents committing crime and you're putting both parents in prison, the judge actually has to take into account what happens to the child and make sure that whatever sentence they pass doesn't negatively affect the child in some, completely imbalanced way. Because, generally speaking, these kids are innocent. Now, Dedra Meero didn't have any relatives, it seems like, so I wonder what happened in this case where her parents must have done something so evil that she was just taken away from them completely. This means that I actually believe Dedra Meero's account that her parents were criminals. They probably really did something wrong. They weren't arrested under Imperial rule, which was a little bit different. I mean, after the Porter Initiative, basically everyone was getting thrown into prison labor camps, even if you had something as small as like a parking ticket. And so after Dedra Meero's parents were thrown into the slammer, she became a ward of the state, and she was sent into the Republic equivalent of, a foster care program. Now, what's even more confusing is it seems like Dedra's saying that at the age of 3, she was sent directly into an Imperial Kinderblock, which doesn't make any sense. The Republic doesn't turn into the Empire until 19 BBY. I mean, Dedra would have been at least 15 to 25 years old when the Republic collapses and the first Imperial Kinderblocks were built. I mean, at that age, she's already considered almost too old to be a child, right? She's definitely a little older and less susceptible to indoctrination as well. Even if we take the lowest age estimate here, if Dedra is 30 years old in Andor, that means she was taken from her parents almost 12 years before the Empire came into power. And essentially, as an orphan child in the Republic era, I think she would have been sent again to some kind of foster care program. I don't think the Republic had a Kinderblock system because the term Kinderblock to Americans it might not trigger anything, but if you ask a German, it means something very specific, and I don't think the Republic would be associated with this kind of imagery. Let me explain. So, Kinderblock is a German word, and when you translate it, it means children's block. Sounds innocent enough until you realize that this word is closely associated to the concentration camps used by the Nazis during World War II to systematically erase Jews, Gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses, whoever else they hated. This event is known as the Holocaust, and it's probably one of the most vile and inhumane acts by any government in the history of man. Now, Kinderblocks were special areas where the children were generally sent within larger concentration camps. Unfortunately, the Nazis spared no one, and they typically viewed every individual as a worker, and if you didn't fit the class of a worker, you were expendable. So the really messed up thing here is children who were older actually fared better in concentration camps because they were able to work and therefore often given more rations and kept alive. Whereas toddlers, infants, the young, and also the old and then the frail were usually executed, either by firing squad or in gas chambers if that specific concentration camp has that facility. One of the most famous Kinderblocks was Block 66. This was a part of the larger Buchenwald concentration camp in Germany. It was actually created by a prisoner, a man named Antonin Kalina, a Czech communist political prisoner who was also a block elder. In a lot of these prisons, the SS guards would actually allow the prisoners to run the internal workings of the camps. And so guys like Kalina actually had a little bit of power and was able to do things that other prisoners weren't. Kalina managed to convince the SS guards to create a new block specifically for the migration of new adolescent prisoners that were arriving from other camps like Auschwitz, which was closer to the front in Poland. With the German military falling apart, basically, Kalina was able to take advantage of all that unrest, and he would actually alter all of the documentation from the transfer from Auschwitz. These were mostly Jewish boys, young Jewish boys, and obviously being a Jew during this period of time was really dangerous because the Nazis were quickly trying to wipe out as many of them as possible before the Allies arrived. And so Kalina would change the documentation of these Jewish boys. They would change their appearance and try to pass them off as Poles and Czechs and other ethnicities. Kalina was also really smart. He hid Block 66 in the corner of the camp that was quite filthy. This is where all the latrines were. The SS guards rarely came to this area, which meant that the kids were a lot safer here as well. Hundreds of Jewish children were saved in Block 66. A reminder that even in the darkest moments in our shared history, there are people like Kalina and his compatriots who refuse to stand by and let evil win, even when they have very little power themselves to do anything. So this is a Kinderblock. This is a very politically loaded term, and again, I think if you're a German, especially a German Jew, and you're watching this show and you hear that word, it's a little bit shocking, right? So something is definitely off here. While I definitely can see the Empire having a Kinderblock-like facility like the one that Omega was held in on Mount Tantus, I really don't think the Galactic Republic would have a similar type of installation. It's just not their style. Plus, judging by the way Dedra Meero thinks, she clearly has been indoctrinated by Imperial propaganda, probably at a young age. But when she was young, there was really just no Empire. I mean, the Empire came when she was basically an adult already, or at least an older teen. And even if there was such a thing as the Republic Kinderblock, that would also mean that Dedra Meero would be indoctrinated to support the Republic and not the Empire. I guess it is possible that Dedra was raised in a normal foster care program, but then at the age of 15 when the Empire rose, she was sent to an Imperial Kinderblock, and then perhaps because of her intelligence, she was groomed to be an ISB agent. That would kind of make more sense. Or maybe something happened while she was in the Republic's juvenile detention system, right? And then that made her really hate the Republic, and when the Empire finally rose to power, she aligned herself more to the new faction. Also, like, her personality definitely matches up with the Empire far more than the Republic. She's an authoritarian. She wants more centralized control. Now, I do have another pretty crazy theory. You should really take this with a grain of salt because it's very likely it's not true, but I still want to kind of entertain this thought. What if Dedra Meero is a clone? We know now, thanks to Omega, that there are female Fett clones. We also know that the Emperor played around with this type of technology. The Fett clones age at twice the rate of the average human being, and if that were the case for Dedra, she would be at the right age to actually go to the Imperial Kinderblocks when she was 3. Or at least what she thinks is Kinderblocks. This could just be some kind of program for like gifted Imperial clones that are designed to become investigators or analysts, something like that. This actually fits in a lot with the larger Star Wars galaxy, how the Empire operated. It fits a lot with how Palpatine operated. He loved clones. The only problem is I don't actually think Tony Gilroy would incorporate a storyline like this. It just seems a little bit out of the blue for him to do that. It is also possible that Dedra is lying to Edie. I mean, even Cyril kind of seems surprised when she reveals this fact about herself. I really do hope that this isn't like a throwaway line and that we get more clarity about what exactly she means here. If Dedra Meero is going to get involved with this controlled opposition plan on Gorman, it's gonna really test her boundaries. It would be really interesting to see her revisit her youth, through some flashbacks to see when she actually developed these very authoritarian views. Although it seems like right now only Cassian Andor gets the flashback treatment, but it would, I think, work pretty well. Anyway, those are my theories about what's going on here. I'm not sure if I have the right answer. There are tens of thousands of you guys out there watching, and so if there is an answer, most likely one of you guys have it. So let me know in the comment section below what you think is going on here. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.